Lithuania's government has declared a national emergency over security risks from meteorological balloons sent from Russia-allied Belarus in recent weeks. According to Associated Press, the balloons have repeatedly forced the closure of Lithuania's main airport, leaving thousands stranded. Europe remains on alert over previous intrusions into NATO airspace during the war in Ukraine. The state of emergency announced Tuesday allows the army to patrol the border area. The balloons are used to smuggle cigarettes, but officials see them as deliberate acts of disruption. They can fly over a huge area, so additional forces are necessary, especially at night, said Vladislav Kondratovic, Lithuania's interior minister. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has called for negotiations on border tensions and said his country does not need war. He denies any hybrid attacks.
Mes kalbam apie balionus, tai yra susieta būtent su balionus, kontrabandinių balionų paieška, dėl to, kad dažnai, jeigu jie yra paleidžiami, jie gali nuskristi į labai didelę teritoriją, todėl papildomos pajėgos, kaip ir nakties metu, kurie dažniausiai yra daroma, tas nusikaltimas yra būtini.
Kariuomenės indėlis bus būtent sustiprinti sienos apsaugos tarnybą, sustiprinti policijos patruliavimą ir pagalbą, randant kontrabandinius krovinius, apieškant galimai kontrabandą gabenančius automobilius, tiesiog sustiprinimas pačių pareigūnų.
Residents of the Kursk region who lost their homes and property as a result of the so-called SVO are suddenly left without their monthly payments. The Kursk governor announced that December will be the last month when people will receive 65,000 rubles. This was reported by the Russian independent publication agency. The Kremlin had previously promised to provide financial support to residents of border regions until the end of the war, when they could safely return to their homes. However, the Russian authorities quickly forgot about this promise. The Kursk region governor announced that funding would be redirected to other programs aimed at the development and restoration of the region. He stated that this decision was approved by the Russian government, meaning at the highest level. These payments were introduced in late February 2025 for residents of Kursk who were forced to flee their villages following the events of August 2024, when the Ukrainian Defense Forces began their operation in the region. Over 73 billion rubles were allocated to this program over the course of the year. According to local authorities, 112,000 people were eligible for assistance. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin publicly supported the payment idea. He claimed that people would be helped until their homes were reclaimed and the areas themselves would be cleared of mines and restored to order. However, several months later, the authorities silently reneged on their promises, leaving hundreds of families without support. Residents are expressing outrage on social media, complaining that they have been made homeless and abandoned. People are forced to rent houses out of pocket. The Kursk region situation is revealing. 4 years into the war, Russia faced acute problems with continued financing, leading to the decision to cut payments to the population and raise taxes. For the Russian dictator, aggression and the seizure of Ukrainian territory proved far more important than the well-being of its own population. The Russian region had cancelled payments to the relatives of occupiers killed in Ukraine. This was reported by the Russian independent publication The Insider, citing sources in the Circassian government. The region hid the existence of these payments for many months, but now the program has effectively ceased operation. Circassia began providing financial assistance to the families of liquidated occupiers in September 2022. At that time, the region allocated 1.1 million rubles per family of the deceased to cover funeral expenses and support relatives until federal funds were received. At that time, it was reported that 30 families had received the funds, with another 6 awaiting transfer. However, the exact date when payments ceased was never announced. At a meeting of the Supreme Council of the Republic, Ksenia Buganova, head of the Kharkiv branch of the People's Front, confirmed that compensation payments had been discontinued. She recalled that the 1.1 million rubles in compensation helped relatives organize a dignified funeral until federal payments and insurance money arrived, which are expected approximately 6 months later. Currently, their total amount reaches 13.5 million rubles. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, many Russian regions have introduced additional one-time payments of 1 to 3 million rubles. This isn't the first time regional budgets have encountered problems due to war expenses. In June, the head of Transbaikal, Alexander Osipov, dismissed his governor after harsh criticism from Prosecutor General Igor Krasnov. The resignation was prompted by a complaint from a Transbaikal resident who had been denied regional payments. In Transbaikal, the payment was 1 million rubles per fatality and an additional 300,000 rubles per child. Economist Yanis Krug explained that many Russian regions are covering payments to war veterans through the federal debt forgiveness program. Previously, these funds were intended for housing construction, transportation upgrades, and regional infrastructure development. Now, however, the regions are forced to spend them on the consequences of the aggression. The situation in Circassia has become a striking example of the deep financial crisis that has affected all of Russia. The state budget deficit in 2025 has reached extreme levels due to the costs of aggression against Ukraine. For the first time in many years, Russia has begun selling off its gold reserves to fund its military budget. This practice demonstrates how rapidly resources are dwindling and underscores the unbearable financial burden the war has placed on Moscow.